Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TYT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Wednesday afternoon. We got some fun stuff. We're going to talk about the Mueller hearings that just concluded. Got a couple of fun things from that, including Matt Gaetz going crazy and spreading conspiracy theories. This is a Republican strategy that happened all throughout the hearings, and Matt Gaetz is a great example of that. Then we have, we're going to switch away from the Mueller investigation and not talk too much about it, because I'm pretty sure, and there's a reason for that, it's because everybody else is talking about it constantly. So I want to get some other stuff in, including some stuff I missed from yesterday, which is Betsy DeVos and her family, how they have benefited personally from working for Donald Trump and the Trump administration. Then we have Nancy Pelosi and the debt deal. So what didn't get talked about a lot yesterday is the recent debt ceiling deal with the Republicans that Nancy Pelosi made, and how that's going to effectively kneecap progressives. So that's really important because it's policy focused, and it kind of shows you whose side Pelosi actually is on. And then, of course, we'll have fun with Boris Johnson and Ivanka Trump. So it's going to be an interesting show. We've got our mix of ridiculous, fun stories. And then, of course, some important stuff when it comes to progressive policy. So, anyway. So, here's what we're going to do. Before we dive into those stories, I want to thank some patrons, patreon.com/TYT Nation. I want to thank Stephen Peralta, Jane Taguchi, Y. Song Stephen, Kelly Bray, Hilliard Green, and Judith Aldrich. So thank you for signing up for becoming a patron. Two out of 4 videos yesterday demonetized. I don't know why. No reason. Nothing. All that. One of them was, I understand, controversial, right? Talking about terrorism and things like that. The other one, I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing that they demonetized. It was really, really strange. But we've been getting hit by demonetization right and left. Look, David Pakman is another channel, another progressive channel. He got hit with 75% demonetization. So 75% of his videos demonetized en masse, and we're getting hit by demonetization too, so that's why it's important you sign up to become a patron to support independent progressive media. By the way, I also want to thank James Yee for helping us through our PayPal account. So that's another way that you can help out the show. We have PayPal, Venmo, and also channel membership. So thank you for helping out, continuing to keep our channel independent and basically on there. Because if I can't afford to do it, I'm not going to be able to do it. At least not every day. Okay, anyway. So let's get into the new. Also, please like and share. Very, very important that you do that. Because that helps it get out to everyone else. All right. So now we'll start with the Mueller segment. Earlier today, former special counsel Robert Mueller had testified once again to Congress, and what he did is basically repeat much of what was spelled out in his report. We didn't really learn anything new. There were a couple of things that were said that we hadn't heard before, more of an opinion from Robert Mueller. But generally, basically, he still says, like he did last time, it's in the report. It's either in the report and I've already said something about it, or I can't talk about that because that's currently under investigation. So now let's get to one of the things that he had talked about, and that was his findings on obstruction of justice. See, President Trump goes out and he claims, oh, no, they didn't find anything, no collusion, no obstruction. That's hilarious because collusion isn't even mentioned in the report at all. but obstruction was. And so here the special counsel is going to answer a question from House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler on the issue of did the president obstruct justice? Did he commit a crime? Let's take a look.
The president has repeatedly claimed that your report found there was no obstruction and that it completely and totally exonerated him. But that is not what your report said, is it?
Correct. It is not what the report said.
And now, reading from page 2 of volume 2 of your report that's on the screen, you wrote, quote, "If we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the president clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, however, we are unable to reach that judgment," close quote. Now, does that say there was no obstruction?
No.
In fact, you are actually unable to conclude the president did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
Well, we, at the outset, determined that we, when it came to the president's culpability, we needed to go forward only after taking into account the OLC opinion that indicated that a president, a sitting president, cannot be indicted.
So the report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And what about total exoneration? Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
Now, in fact, your report expressly states that it does not exonerate the president.
It does.
And your investigation actually found, quote, multiple acts by the president that were capable of exerting undue influence over law enforcement investigations, including the Russian interference and obstruction investigations. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, so look, that's pretty clear, right? Did the president do obstruction? Well, we didn't find that he didn't. Again, fairly clear. President committed a crime. He tried to obstruct justice, and he did so in multiple different ways. And he also mentioned that only because William Barr uses Justice Department to protect him does the president not face any consequences. Now, later on, of course, Mueller did drop this, and this was actually something that we hadn't heard before. Yeah, they could probably go after Donald Trump for obstruction after he leaves office. And so that's interesting and might have Trump a little bit worried. But my question is, how many times do the Democrats have to drag Mueller out to say what basically is in the report? I mean, again, this is the second time that he's testified, and the second time where he's basically said, look, I wrote the report. This is what's in the report. Why are you asking me even more questions? And some of the other questions, mainly from Republicans, had to do about the ridiculous, Steele memo or Steele dossier. And he's like, I can't talk about that. There's currently an investigation. I can't actually talk about that. But we'll get to that in another segment. But, okay. Here's the thing. Do the Democrats think that Donald Trump's going to stop lying about this and say, oh, no, you're right, Mueller. You're right, dog. Turns out I did obstruct justice. I did try to obstruct the investigation. Oops, my bad. Well, actually, that's not far from reality because he already did that. He admitted on live television that, oh, yeah, I fired Comey to stop the Russia thing. And then, of course, later on, he's like, oh, no, I can get in trouble for that. Oh, crap. And still, for the report, there's, again, nothing new here, right? So how many times are we going to rehash this Mueller report? We know Donald Trump's a criminal. How about we actually do something about it? I mean, that would be a start. Let's do something about it. Oh, right. We won't because Nancy Pelosi. So Nancy Pelosi is the leader of House Democrats. And I say leader ironically because she refuses to do anything that remotely resembles leading. She refuses to impeach. See, again, I figured it out, right? See, there's a reason that she's not impeaching. This is the Democrats' re-election strategy. That's why they continue to trot Mueller out. Yes, we already know the president's a criminal. Yes, we already know he obstructed justice. It is clear as day, plain as day to anybody who's read even a little bit of the Mueller report, right? Or at least read the conclusions of the Mueller report. We know he's a criminal. Okay, let's do something about it. Let's stop the theater. But here's the thing. Nancy Pelosi's re-election strategy is hype out how bad Donald Trump is, the criminal, right? And then not do anything about it. In the hopes that this Mueller stuff will drive Democratic voters to the polls. So running on Trump is bad, Trump is a criminal, which that's a new one, but Trump is bad, right? Didn't we already try that in 2016? We already did that. This is such a cynical play. This is theater. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats could bring articles of impeachment towards the president, and they could make a very convincing case, and actually more information could come out. But we already have him. The thing is, they refuse to do so. Why? It's because they think it's 1995 all over again, and that if we impeach Donald Trump for his obvious criminality, it will help him, like the impeachment articles against Bill Clinton helped Bill Clinton. Now, so here's the difference, right? For one, it's not 1995 anymore, right? Clinton was actually really popular during that time. Unlike Donald Trump, who has his favorability ratings are disastrous. He's sitting around a 40% on average, right? He's deeply unpopular, but also he is a criminal. He has done crime. And look, did Bill Clinton lie to Congress? Yes. Did Donald Trump lie to Congress? Absolutely. He also lied to investigators. He also lies 10,000 times, or has lied 10,000 times. I mean, for Christ's sakes, what more do you need? If lying to Congress was enough to impeach the president, begin articles of impeachment, well, then we could have done that the day Donald Trump went into office. But no, we actually do find real crimes. Obstruction's a crime. Campaign finance violations are a crime. Ordering people to pay off, mistresses, that's a crime, right? It's a campaign finance violation. But no. We're not going to do anything about it because instead of doing our jobs, or doing their jobs, I should say, Pelosi wants to continue to play partisan political games. And I know the argument here, right, that's coming. Oh, but you don't understand. If we impeach the president, his defenders will come out and defend him even more. But they're already out. Look, here's the thing. Do you think the vast amount of Americans that despise Donald Trump are going to say, hey, now, whoa, man, you're impeaching the president. That means I'm going to go vote for the president. No, come on. Besides, impeachment, as I mentioned before, that will allow more damaging information on Donald Trump to get out. Right now, there are already still other investigations into Trump and his finances, the organization, etc., right? And so this will bring more of that stuff out to light. Money laundering, for example. Whether or not the president engaged in it. His relationship with Deutsche Bank, his relationship with Saudi Arabia, his ties with Mohammed bin Salman. I mean, all these different things, they could really look into Donald Trump. Because again, he's a lifelong criminal. There are so many things that they can find in these investigations if Pelosi actually had the balls to step up and do it. But unfortunately, she does not want to take the chance because she does not care about holding the criminal president accountable. All she cares about is, ooh, I'm going to triangulate. I'm going to look at the optics. I'm going to look at the politics. Oh, what if moderate Republicans will get mad at me for impeachment? Because we're definitely counting on the moderate Republican vote. No, she's again setting a bad precedent while letting this criminal continue to get away with it. Again, Donald Trump has never been punished for anything wrong he's ever done in his life. And Nancy Pelosi is going to continue to allow it to happen. Weak, feckless Democratic leadership. Okay. I'll have more on Pelosi later. Believe me. All right. Moving on. So let's go to our other Mueller-related story. Hold on here. Now, earlier today, there was a hearing with Robert Mueller. He testified to members of Congress and had its fair share of interesting events, including when Mueller responded to the question of if President Trump can be charged with a crime, the crime of obstruction, even after he's not president. Well, now that was interesting. That was something new that we learned. And also, Robert Mueller affirmed once again that he did not clear Donald Trump of any crimes. But the hearing was also filled with Republican idiocy. Like whenever, for example, Louis Gohmert talks or yells about injustice. It's so much injustice what we're doing to Donald Trump. So now this gets me to, of course, the Republican strategy, right? So this is the grand Republican strategy that you saw to defeat Mueller's testimony. And part of it is, again, to sabotage Mueller's, how people view Robert Mueller, his credibility, and also to bring up the Steele dossier. Now, let me give you an example of Matt Gaetz, whose main argument against Mueller is, yeah, but the Steele dossier. Take a look.
It is absurd to suggest that a operative for the Democrats was meeting with this Russian lawyer the day before and the day after the Trump Tower meeting, and yet that's not something you referenced. Now, Glenn Simpson testified under oath. He had dinner with Veselnitskaya the day before and the day after this meeting with the Trump team. Do you have any basis, as you sit here today, to believe that Steele was lying?
As I said before, and I'll say again, it's not my purview. Others are investigating what you
So it's not your purview to look into whether or not Steele's lying. It's not your purview to look into whether or not anti-Trump Russians are lying to Steele. And it's not your purview to look at whether or not Glenn Simpson was meeting with the Russians the day before and the day after you write 3,500 words about the Trump campaign meeting. So I'm wondering how these decisions are guided. I look at the Inspector General's report. I'm citing from page 404 of the Inspector General's report. It states, Page stated, Trump's not ever going to be president, right? Right. Strzok replied, no, he's not. We'll stop it. Also in the Inspector General's report, there's someone identified as attorney number two. Attorney number two, this is page 419, replied, hell no, and then added, Viva la resistance. Attorney number two in the Inspector General's report and Strzok both worked on your team, didn't they?
Peter Strzok worked for me for a period of time, yes.
Yeah, but so did the other guy that said Viva la resistance. And here's what I'm kind of noticing, Director Mueller. When people associated with Trump lied, you threw the book at them. When Christopher Steele lied, nothing. And so it seems to be that when Glenn Simpson met with Russians, nothing. When the Trump campaign met with Russians, 3,500 words. And maybe the reason why there are this discrepancies in what you focused on is because the team was so biased.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Pledged to stop Trump.
Jeffries.
Well, that is a big assumption where he basically just throws out, wow, it was Christopher Steele. Absolutely lied. Did he, though? Well, we'll get to his credibility in a minute because he did make some very salacious claims, some of which we haven't found to be true, some of which actually are true. So we'll get to that. But first, he kept asking, well, I mean, Steele dossier. Why don't you talk about it? Why don't you talk about it? That's because it's an ongoing investigation, you putz. But look, I guess that's kind of the point, right? Let's not talk about obstruction. No, let's focus on the Steele dossier. Let's talk about Peter Strzok and his opinions that he doesn't like Donald Trump. You know who else he didn't like? He didn't like Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. And by the way, in the context of, oh, don't worry, we'll stop him, they mean the voters. He literally thought, oh, no, the voters, we're going to stop Donald Trump. If it were an FBI plot conspiracy to try to stop Donald Trump, which is ridiculous, then they probably would have stopped Donald Trump if it were the deep state, right? Unless, of course, the deep state is so incredibly inept that maybe you don't even have to worry about it because they suck at their jobs. I don't know. But this is what the Republican strategy is to basically obfuscate, change the, flip the script, change the narrative here as, no. This isn't about President Trump doing criminal things like obstruction. Oh, no. This is about everyone being so unfairly biased against Donald Trump that they tried to stop him and they sucked so badly at it that they couldn't. That's their narrative, right? And here's the thing. Both Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were fired for being anti-Trump. As soon as that came out, as soon as they found out that, Oh, he sent negative text messages about Donald Trump. Gone. Fired. Immediately gone. Okay, so he worked for you once. And he was fired. Because he was not... And look, I agreed with the firing because you need to be impartial, you need to be fair, and give everyone a fair hearing based on the facts. If you have some preconceived notions, well, that might color your investigation. And so, look, if you want to be 100% fair to anybody, even Donald Trump, you have to make sure that you have people that are neutral. I mean, again, maybe I make too much sense. But anyway, now, what Gaetz is doing is basically he's repeating conspiracy theories that came straight from the mouth of Sean Hannity and Fox News. Now, what about the dirty dossier? Well, what about the obstruction of justice? One of those things is a crime. Yeah, but that's funded by the Democrats. That Fusion GPS. Okay. You know, in the words of Trump, they call that Oppo research. Okay. Now, here's the thing. A couple of weeks ago, the Justice Department had an opportunity to grill Christopher Steele. So what happened? They did it for 16 hours. And while the meeting was described as contentious, investigators, this is from the IG, right? They ultimately found Steele's testimony to be credible. They also added that he had offered both new and important information. And a lot of this, of course, has to do with Carter Page and him, meeting with Russians. In fact, a lot of the information in that dossier was eventually proven to be true during a series of different investigations. Again, Carter Page meeting with the CEO of a Russian oil company, Rosneft, as well as other high-level Russian officials, right? So, nonetheless, the Republican strategy is to basically pin the entire investigation on the dossier. Oh, no, it was started. The Mueller investigation was started because of the dirty dossier. No, it actually wasn't. That is a pure lie. And then they say fake dossier, fake investigation, politically motivated. They're 100% biased. Again, this is pure projection against, pure projection from the Republicans. But that's their goal. So now watching this, it's obvious that Gaetz is only there to push a specific narrative, which has led, of course, to fun on social media. Walter Schaub saying, Matt Gaetz is 30 seconds away from mentioning the Illuminati and the lizard people. Or it could be the aliens. Now, I'm not saying it's the aliens, but it's the aliens. Could be, anyway. I don't know. Maybe the lizard people are aliens. Mike Avila says, okay, Gohmert, Jim Jordan, and national embarrassment Matt Gaetz have had their turn. Any others left to sit in front of the seat, in the front seat of the GOP clown car? No. I think that's about it. Adam Best said, to the GOP, this isn't just a hearing. It's an unofficial episode of The Apprentice where Matt Gaetz, Jim Jordan, and Louis Gohmert and the rest of the sycophants compete to see who can suck up to Trump the most. I would say that seems to be fairly accurate. Because, again, all they did was not talk about, they didn't talk at all about the whole point of the hearing, which is the Mueller investigation and what that report, or what was found and put into that report, which, by the way, much of it is still redacted. Brandon Buckman said this, Gaetz has presented no questions about obstruction, instead focusing on Steele, Simpson, which Mueller have already said he cannot discuss because there are currently other investigations going on. A note, Gaetz told the New York Times yesterday that his goal with today's hearing is, quote, we are going to re-elect the president. So already he's like, look, that's my goal, and here's how I'm going to do it. I mean, it's fairly obvious the role that he is playing. And unfortunately, a lot of Republicans, most of the Republicans up there that spoke today and asked questions, were all along the same lines. We have to re-elect Trump, so we are going to do whatever we can to obfuscate this hearing. And to, cast aspersions on Trump's asparagus or something, or Mueller's asparagus. I don't know. Whatever Louis Gohmert was trying to do. But Nick Pappas added on, saying anti-Trump Russians is like saying the sober Matt Gaetz. And so that's funny, right? So which anti-Trump Russians are there? That's the first I've ever heard of that. Are there anti-Trump Russians? I'm sure. Yeah, I don't think all Russians like Donald Trump. I don't think all Russians like Vladimir Putin, of course, right? But where are the anti-Trump Russians in this? That's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird thing to talk about. Tom Nichols says Gaetz knows that there's many fine decaffeinated brands in the market, right? Well, to be fair, caffeine is awesome, and so, I'm going to be against switching to a less caffeinated brand. Jennifer Hayden says Matt Gaetz is the equivalent of an old Caps tweeting. It's between him and Louis Gohmert, really, of who screamed the most during these hearings. Ken Tremendous says does the fact that Matt Gaetz' Twitter bio includes a quote from Trump saying Gaetz is handsome, cracked the top 10 most embarrassing things about him. I'm not sure it does. You go ahead and you can look at that Twitter bio. It is in there. It's true. How very, very sad. Tim Alberta said Matt Gaetz is not a legislator. He's an entertainer. And he was quoting someone else. That person happened to be former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, who just said, oh, yeah, Gaetz, he's an entertainer. He's not a serious person. He's not a legislator. All he does is theater. Good to know. Good to know. And finally, Aaron Rupar said Matt Gaetz is basically the human embodiment of a Hannity monologue, which I guess is somewhat entertaining, but not full of any sort of factual information at all. And that's where we're at today. No factual information from the Republicans. Again, trying to, refuse the reality that we have a criminal president who obstructed justice. And they are trying to spin their own narrative and say, it's not us that's the problem. No, it's the Democrats. It's never us. That's who they are, and projection is what they do. Okay. So we're going to go a quick break here. Then we've got Nancy Pelosi and her total disaster of a debt ceiling agreement. Then we'll talk about Betsy DeVos and her corruption. And then we'll have fun, if we have time, with Ivanka Trump. So that's fun. So stay right here. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Super chats, questions, comments, etc. I'll read a few when we get back after the break. Stay right here around the nation. Welcome back to the show. Run the Nation right here, TWT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Okay, so we got some fun comments from you guys and some super chats. But I also noticed there's some kitty talk in the chat room. So that's kind of cool. So you guys know we got the new kitten and everything. He settled in pretty well. This morning, like, I could not get up because he was like laying right here for at least an hour. I was like, I got to get up and I got to start working. And he did not care. And I did not want to move to wake him up. So that's how my morning went. All right, anyway. He's doing really good. Okay, anyway. So let's go to the comments here. Sarge Tech asked earlier, when will there be a show on the 30th and 31st? No, I don't think there will be. For one, I'm going to be in Detroit. So I'm going to be at the Revolution Rally. So that's about 6 o'clock. And, you know, I've got my wife there up for her birthday. So not only are we taking a trip to Detroit to go and cover that rally and be part of that rally, but I also have my wife's birthday to worry about. So no show. But maybe I can do like a small video or a small live stream from somewhere on that and you know, maybe film at least a speech or two, and we'll go from there. But we'll see what I can do, what I can get away with. All right. More comments. Jinxana says, if I had to be Matt Gaetz, I'd probably be day drinking too. Oh, damn. I love that. A couple of super chats. The Glass Sword just stopped in to say it. I unfortunately can't watch as much during the 3 to 4 hour. Totally understand. There's a lot of people who couldn't watch during the 5 to 6 hour time slot, and sometimes time slots are just hard, especially since we're East Coast, and I know a lot of our viewers are on the West Coast. So, and then finally, Jedi Mullet 77 says the Clinton impeachment was 1998. I don't know why I kept saying 1995. I knew that. The first night of testimony, more people were watching Monday Night Wrestling. Clinton was popular because everyone had a credit card and a mall. Impeach Pelosi. Look, I wasn't saying why. I was just saying Clinton was popular back then, and it's not the same as it used to be. Things are much, much different. People are much more plugged into the news, so they care more about what's going on, what's happening. And this is our president being a criminal is kind of a big deal. So I think more people would be in support of that, of actually holding these hearings, especially since Trump is so deeply unpopular. But, okay, anyway. Moving on, let's go to Nancy Pelosi. I think I'm going to get angry here. I'm going to try and hold it together. Now, on Monday, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi struck a budget deal with the Trump administration to avoid hitting the next debt ceiling. Now, this deal would lift spending limits by about $320 billion and hand the Pentagon a $738 billion budget. That's an increase of $22 billion from the previous year. Already a complete disaster because the Pentagon does not need more money. The last thing the Pentagon needs is more money. Oh, but Jeff, don't you support the troops? I do support the troops. They're not seeing any of that money. You know who's seeing that money? Defense contractors. So already terrible, but it gets worse. But before I explain why, for those of you who might be like, wait, what's the debt ceiling? What's the debt limit? What do you mean by that? The debt ceiling is basically a legislative limit on how much money the federal government can borrow to cover debts that it's already previously accrued. That's why it's such a big deal. And if you don't raise it, the United States could default on its debt. And then, of course, that might trigger a global financial crisis. So this could be very bad if we don't raise the debt limit. So then you might be wondering, well, then why are you going after Nancy Pelosi for making this ridiculous, for making this deal? It's because of what she did and what she got from the deal. Now, Pelosi, in her negotiations, didn't just raise the debt ceiling. She suspended it. Okay, well, let me give you some details. And you might be wondering, well, what's the problem with that? Again, I don't see the issue. Well, here's the timing, right? So Donald Trump, now without a debt ceiling, can continue to borrow money to finance his ridiculous things, right? So that means he's going to end up spending more money, at least as much as can get through the House, which unfortunately, even though it's democratically controlled, there is a large contingent of corporate Democrats who will approve, as you saw, even more military spending. So, of course, they spend more money, they have to go and borrow more, the debt increases, right? So now, what they've done is that they basically handed Donald Trump and the Republicans freedom to spend without getting anything in return. And so, here's the thing. Democrats had leverage since they control the House. Why didn't you use any of your leverage to try to get some concessions from increasing the debt limit and use it as Mitch McConnell had been using it, right? Mitch McConnell would always use the debt limit to try to force some concessions, usually spending cuts in the domestic side, from Democrats. The Democrats have offered no such stipulation. And here's the other thing, right? The other thing that's frustrating is that this limit has been suspended, but only suspended until Trump is out of office. It basically is suspended until 2021. After the 2020 elections, it will kick back in for what could be very likely to be a Democratic president. Oh, so a disaster. Complete and utter disaster. It's okay with Trump. No debt limit. We can borrow however much we want, which means we can spend however much we want without worrying about increasing the debt limit to pay for it under Trump. But under Democrats, Democratic leadership, oh no, can't do that. Now that has, of course, the effect of basically kneecapping progressive priorities. Now she got a lot of pushback, right? A lot of pushback. Paul Blest of Splinter wrote on Tuesday that if the eventual Democratic presidential nominee defeats Trump in 2020, this is one of the first things that they will have to deal with in their first year in office. So they have to deal with the debt limit now. That means no progressive priorities will pass unless you have a gigantic Democratic majority in the House and the Senate. And most of them happen to be progressive. Now, right now, the Republicans are expected to retain the Senate. And so, Now, Blest wrote, if you really listen, you can almost hear Texas Senator Ted Cruz yelling on the floor of the Senate that Congress shouldn't raise the debt limit by $1 more unless President Bernie Sanders promises to drop his demand for Medicare for all. Now, he had more to say on this. Citing a Democratic source close to negotiations, Blest reported that the possibility of ending the debt ceiling came up and that interest was expressed, but it was decided that it was, quote, too difficult to do in this particular agreement. I know, Republicans, well, I mean, debt limit, of course we should have the debt limit unless it's under a Republican, because we don't actually care about debts and deficits. But, I mean, if a Democrat gets in office, obviously we totally care about debts and deficits, and we got to do something about this. You even had, and now I seem to forget his name, but there was a congressman that was Deadbeat Dad. That's how I can remember him. Actually, he's very anti-Trump now, which is hilarious. So he came out on Twitter, and he was like, hey, you guys remember the Tea Party? We kind of ran against debts and deficits. What are you guys doing? Well, here's the thing. It was never about debts and deficits. It was about log jamming any sort of, progressive or even not progressive Democratic priority in Congress under Obama. That's what it was about. That's all what it was about. But here's the thing. Do we even need a debt limit? No, we don't. The debt ceiling, again, the debt limit is paying for things that we've already spent money on, not new spending. Basically, we're just covering our debt. But see, Republicans, again, they use this as leverage all the time against Democrats in order to extract giant cuts and to prevent new spending. This is something Pelosi has refused to do against Republicans. In fact, Blessed wrote this, quote, "The biggest win of Pelosi's second stint as Speaker so far was holding the line in the government shutdown earlier this year." And she did, we give her credit for that. So, but here's the overall point. So Pelosi, he writes, knows how to use leverage. She just didn't push hard enough this time for whatever reason. Well, I think I have an idea. But, hey, didn't you know? She's a master legislator. You must now bow to the queen in her sarcastic clapping. I mean, look, this is so bad, this deal. You even have people who worked for establishment Democrats saying, wow, this was bad. This is Adam Jenelson, who served as deputy chief of staff to former Senate Democratic leader Harry Reid. You remember Harry Reid? Harry the Lion. Look, let's be fair. Nobody could be as bad as Chuck Schumer. So even Harry Reid was slightly better. But anyway, he said this in an interview with Bloomberg, which reported on Tuesday that 2020 Democratic presidential candidates are, quote, quietly expressing consternation that the agreement could set them up for a disastrous first year in the White House. Jenelson said, quote, "The timing of it really bugs me. It sets up a crisis of the first year of the president's administration. We're letting them light the fuse on another bomb and place it squarely in the middle of the next president's first year in office. That's really bad." Now, the Democratic leadership, Jenelson says, handed Republicans, who were favored to hold the Senate in 2020, a major weapon to completely derail progressive agenda items that 2020 Democrats have placed at the center of their White House bids. Some of those, of course, are, Medicare for all, free college, or I should say tuition-free higher education at public colleges and universities. And as Jenelson pointed out on Twitter, Republicans did weaponize the debt ceiling against Barack Obama in 2011. And so, look, why would any Democrat ever think that this won't happen again? Especially a President Sanders or a President Warren. Well, Jenelson said, quote, "I've been asking around for defense of this deal, and the main rationale being offered is that top Democrats don't think McConnell will weaponize the debt ceiling against a Democratic president in 2021. Are you kidding me? That has to be the most naive statement I have ever seen. Here you got the Democrats, supposedly smart people, saying, Mitch McConnell, he will not try to screw us over in 2021. I believe that he won't do it. Mitch McConnell, such an honorable gentleman. He would never weaponize the debt ceiling against us like he did in 2011. This is the guy who blocked Merrick Garland for a year. That was Obama's Supreme Court pick. Didn't even get a hearing. Didn't get a confirmation hearing. Nothing. Blocked him completely. Mitch McConnell is the king of obstruction. You know what he calls himself? The Grim Reaper. He kills pretty much everything that comes to his desk that he doesn't actually want to do. And you know what? I bet Pelosi knows this. Of course she does. She's not stupid. Brian Fallon, executive director of progressive advocacy group Demand Justice, and former aide to Chuck Schumer, said this, quote, it was fun for a while to debate whether the Democrat who beats Trump should focus on election reform or climate change in 2021. Now Republicans will make it a fight over lifting the debt ceiling. The negotiations over the debt ceiling clearly illustrate the asymmetry between the two parties. The GOP is happy to preserve the debt limit because they know Dems will never hang it over a GOP president's head. On the other hand, the GOP is happy to play chicken with it when a Dem is in office. And he's absolutely right. And you know what? This is on purpose. Nancy Pelosi has shown over and over again that she despises progressives. She's not a progressive. She loves the status quo, and she's very, very worried about Elizabeth Warren and especially Bernie Sanders, winning the Democratic nomination and going on to crush Donald Trump, because at least in the case of Bernie Sanders, we know for certain that it would be a layup that he would destroy President Trump. I actually take it back when I used to say that Nancy Pelosi is not a master legislator. She is. She just does it to the benefit of the Republicans. And two, master strokes. This, and remember the PAYGO legislation. Nancy Pelosi has ensured that a Bernie Sanders administration would be completely ineffective at doing anything that it promised to do. That's it. She has completely destroyed any chance of having any sort of progressive legislation. And she wants to call herself a progressive. Nancy Pelosi and corporate Democrats, they are not on our side. They would rather sabotage us to ensure that nothing at all changes for their corporate donors. That's who they are. It's so incredibly frustrating. All right. I don't know if I have time for the Betsy DeVos story. God damn. All right. I'll have to save that for tomorrow. Well, let's have fun with Ivanka. Ivanka Trump has the best words, the greatest words. Now, it appears that the eldest Trump daughter might have inherited some of her father's vaunted spelling skills. Now, this is great. Now, the White House senior advisor to President Trump congratulated Boris Johnson on becoming Britain's next prime minister after winning a ballot vote of Conservative Party members. Now, he also just met with the Queen, and so basically, he has been cemented as Britain's next prime minister. Boris freaking Johnson. What are you doing? What are you doing? This guy's basically British Trump. So, congratulations on a terrible decision. But look, in her congratulations to the new British PM, Ivanka kind of got the country wrong. She said this: "Congratulations, Boris Johnson, on becoming the next Prime Minister of the United Kingston." Kingston's where I get my RAM. So, good to know that that's their own country. By the way, I don't make any money from Kingston. But maybe I should, try to get together for an advertising deal. I don't know. Anyway. So, look, she was kind of close. Kingdom, Kingston, kind of, right? So, obviously, social media had a little bit of fun with this. Candace Amos tweeting this: United what? Kingston. Kingston, of course. It's the United Kingston, guys. Richie Fed says, is the United Kingston next to Wales, and it's spelled like the sea creature? Hilarious. Kids Unite 2020 says, I'm 14 and I can spell better than you. No, probably. There's a lot of smart kids, and none of the Trump kids seem to apply. Look, you think that Ivanka's one of the smarter ones. No, she's just quiet. She doesn't really say a whole lot, and when she does, she rightly so gets mocked for it. More. Kitty Nose says, I see you have your daddy's spelling skills. Is there anyone in this family who can form a sentence without spelling errors? Anyone? Baron? Maybe Baron. But I don't know. Everyone else, not very smart. Not very smart. Leslie Abravanel says, is the United Kingston the place where you operate your sweatshops? You fraudulent shanda spawn of the most racist POS to squat in the White House. Dang. Jeff Tiedrich said, the illiterate buffoon doesn't fall far from the illiterate buffoon tree. Unfortunately, yes. Theo says an adult should be limiting your screen time, or at least teaching you how to use this. Well, spell check maybe wouldn't really work in this situation because Kingston is a thing. And so maybe you just need to pay attention to what you tweet. That might help. Lachlan Markley says, as a Hudson Valley native, I too welcome Kingston's reunification. Must be a British thing. Jess Dweck says, how dare you suggest this person has no place engaging in international diplomacy? And Brian Class says, Ivanka sends her congratulations to the Prime Minister of United Kingston shortly after Trump praised the Prince of Wales, again spelled wrong, like the sea creature. These people are so utterly incompetent and embarrassing, even on the smallest stuff. Maybe it's because we know more. Maybe it's because we see this all unfold on social media. But right afterwards, of course, Ivanka noticed, I guess after being roundly mocked for it, delete. No, you know what? They should take Boris Johnson, create a United Kingston on like some small island somewhere with like a palm tree and say, okay, go and be the prime minister of that. Enjoy. And actually let competent people run the British government. I don't know what the conservative PMs were thinking, but terrible decision. Terrible. But, hey, look, as far as the Trumps are concerned, they're the best people. They have the best brains, and they're not at all international embarrassments. And look, I don't even care so much about, like, a misspell, but the entire family is one of the most corrupt, vapid, sorry excuses for human beings that we've literally had in power. And now, our friends in the UK, we've got something in common now. Because we both have a ridiculous leader. Congratulations. Welcome to the club. Jesus. Yeah, I know. Words are hard. Words are very, very difficult. I mean, come on, man. They have the best words. The greatest words. Maybe ever. I don't know. Okay, again, we got one more story, but it's really, really long. So screw it. We'll do it. I thought that story would take a little longer, but it didn't. So now we're going way over time. All right. The Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. Words are hard. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos is a very wealthy person. She comes from a very wealthy family, the DeVos family. Now, she ended up securing her position with hundreds of millions of dollars in donations from Republican or to Republican politicians. And now, since becoming a Trump cabinet member, wouldn't you know it, her and her family are making even more money thanks to Donald Trump. Now, this is according to Yahoo News. Since taking the reins at the Education Department, DeVos, while supporting cuts to public education and making a push for a focus on financing charter schools, has actually made a lot of money from, some of their business interests. Now, her family has seen an income boon of millions of dollars through their investments thanks to Donald Trump's tax reform. Now, the valuation on her assets, not just her assets, but the family's assets, is in between $200 to $600 million. Now, the question is, of course, has she made any recent investments that would conflict for their position as chief of the Department of Education? The answer to that is actually kind of tricky because we don't really know. Ethics attorneys argue that the complexity of her finances makes it impossible or nearly impossible for government watchdogs to track who might be having an influence over her. So that means there's a lot of companies or people that could have influence over her, as she had before coming into the administration, had influence over other politicians. So now, DeVos family spokesperson Nick Wassmuller said in response to questions about her investments, quote, like all investors, the family seeks investments that grow in value over time. Well, it's obvious. These long-term investments have and do fluctuate in terms of income produced annually, and that fluctuation is based on a variety of factors. It is impossible, given the complexity and diversity of these investments, to attribute any individual shifts to specific policy changes, as is suggested. Certainly, the strong economic expansion during the Trump administration has had a positive impact in the investments of all Americans, whether direct or via their 401ks, IRA, pensions, etc. They're calling it a vast economic expansion. No, do you know who had a vast economic expansion during the Trump administration? People who are already extremely wealthy. The average tax cuts for people making about $20,000 a year was around $40 thanks to the Trump tax cuts. Wages, as you know, are continuing to be stagnant, so you haven't really seen a whole lot of wage growth that hasn't been swallowed up by inflation. Compare that to the top 1%. They save, on average, over $60,000 in taxes, thanks to the Trump tax cuts. Now, I don't know about you, but $40, that's not a whole lot. Not a big help, especially when the country, half of the country, cannot afford a $400 emergency. But hey, look, Betsy DeVos, she got richer. I mean, you know, she needs an 11th yacht. 10's not enough. 10's not enough, especially one got damaged. So you got to replace that yacht with an even better, newer 11th yacht. So now let's break down her finances, right? And show you how well they did under Donald Trump. A couple of examples. The RDV Corporation, a DeVos family-run investment firm chaired by her husband, Dick DeVos, which obviously has no relation to her or any sort of impact on the kind of policies that she would support, brought in more than $6 million in 2018 through distributive shares. A year earlier, while Trump was trying to and eventually pass the Republican tax reform plan, that business helped them bring in only about $1.6 million. That is a huge gain, going from 1.6 to $6 million. Their financing of Graken Parent Incorporated, now a subsidiary of Chicago-headquartered Methode Electronics, led the DeVos family having more than $5 million in capital gains in 2018. In 2017, however, that their disclosures showed an income of less than $201. Going from $201 to $5 million in capital gains. Thanks, of course, to the Trump administration. Now, the family also profited off a Michigan-based company called Profile Industrial Packaging. 2 years ago, with investments valued between $1 and $5 million, the DeVos's had an income amount of about $277,000. In 2018, that same investment gave them an income of $1.3 million of distributive shares and capital gains. Now, you might think, hey, look, what does this have to do with anything? Good for her, great, good old American capitalism. Now, the issue here is it's literally starving the government of needed revenue to do things for the public good. For example, education. She is the Secretary of Education. She decides how much funding schools can get, or education gets. With the government getting less revenue from her paying less taxes, you have less to work with. And so she says, well, let's just cut education then. I mean, I got a tax cut, so I'm going to cut, since we have less money, I'm going to cut education. Not only that, but again, she wants to cut education because she wants to profit off charter schools. Now, here's the thing. This family, even with the old tax rates, and many families like hers, are already worth billions of dollars. And other reports does state that while DeVos herself is not involved with her husband's family business or their overall investments, the income on these filings shows that her related organizations have reaped the benefits of the administration's very business-friendly policies. And ethics experts believe that DeVos's holdings are all private investments, including, that because DeVos's holdings are all private, including a variety of limited liability companies, government watchdogs are unable to track who may be trying to have influence over her. Virginia Canner, chief ethics counsel for watchdog group Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics, said in an interview, quote, "I think when you have somebody who's the head of an agency, they have much greater impact as a regulator than people who might be put into other positions. We have no idea who the investors are, who the creditors are, or who the customers are for these types of investments. They could be doing business and profiting with their affiliation to people who have business before the Department of Education." So this could, of course, lead to the Department of Education making decisions, policy decisions, based on who is helping her grow her account, who is helping her make money. And look, since she's been education secretary, since Donald Trump passed the tax cuts, I've shown you just how much she has made, just how much she has profited off doing what she's been doing. And what's worse is at the same time that she's been making all of this money, DeVos has been proposing strict cuts to education that could impact children within impoverished communities. A Washington Post analysis shows Trump's 2020 budget proposal cuts education spending by 12%, or the equivalent to a drop of spending of about $8.8 billion. The administration wants to remove $2 billion from federal grant programs, and in doing so would eliminate grant aid for millions of students with families making less than $60,000 a year. So now the problem, of course, here is that you have wealthy, incredibly wealthy and privileged people making so much money for themselves from investments that could be from the people that they regulate. And these same people are cutting money for the poor. They are destroying public education for poor people and ensuring that only the wealthy and powerful and privileged get a quality education. This is corruption. This is gross. It's not that her and her family are the sole problem or the fact that she's rich that's the problem. Their investment and income is just an example of the sickness. It's deregulation, it's lack of transparency, and it's greed and corruption that are the real problem. We've got to get money out of politics. We've got to get lobbying and influence peddling out and outlaw it. And we need to have a system where people can no longer literally buy their own cabinet positions as Betsy DeVos has done. She is a literal cancer in the, education department, and she needs to go and needs to be replaced by somebody who actually cares about funding education and doesn't just make money off investments, that could come from cutting education and shifting vital resources away from people who need it to corporations who fund your campaigns. Okay. All right. So that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. Please like and share the clips. Thank you for sharing the stream as well. Thank you for the super chats, for the support. Basically, I'm gonna have to continue to keep asking you guys to support the show on Patreon. I don't know how many videos are going to be demonetized today, but I'm guessing at least 2 or 3, or about half of what I put out, which has been the case for at least the last couple of weeks. So please support us on Patreon so we can continue to do what we're doing, or become a channel member. And there are lots of different ways, of course, you can continue to help out the show. So thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys on Thursday.